The lasagna was still warm in my hands as I stood frozen in the doorway of our bedroom. My wife's perfume hung heavy in the air, recently sprayed to mask another scent, one I recognized instantly but my mind refused to process. "What are you going to do, cry?" Samantha's voice cut through the silence, lacking any hint of panic or shame. I'd left work early that Tuesday, canceling my meeting with the Henderson account when they postponed at the last minute. On the drive home, I'd hummed along to Springsteen's Dancing in the Dark, thinking about how Samantha and I needed to reconnect. 19 years of marriage had dulled our spark, but I believed we still had something worth fighting for. That's why I'd stopped at Bellita, her favorite Italian restaurant, for her beloved lasagna and tiramisu. The first sign that something was wrong came when I pulled into our driveway. A charcoal Audi I didn't recognize was parked across the street, too close to our house to be a coincidence. Still, I dismissed the uneasiness crawling up my spine. Then I noticed the unfamiliar wristwatch on the entryway table. Expensive. Not mine. The perfume was the next clue, Samantha's signature scent, but stronger than usual, as if freshly applied. As I climbed the stairs, laughter filtered down the hallway, intimate whispers punctuated by sounds I'd heard countless times before, but never from outside our bedroom door. Now I stood in the doorway, the lasagna container growing slick in my sweating hands as I watched my wife of nearly 2 decades tangled in our bed sheets with Ryan Mitchell, my business partner and supposed best friend for the past 15 years. Their bodies froze mid-motion when the door swung open, but their expressions couldn't have been more different. Ryan's face contorted with shame and fear. Samantha's remained eerily calm, almost amused. "What are you going to do, cry?" she repeated, sitting up slightly without bothering to cover herself. In that moment, something inside me, something I'd carried for 42 years, cracked and fell away. The rage I expected never came. Instead, a cold clarity washed over me. I set the lasagna container on the dresser and pulled out my phone. "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected, "I think I'll take a picture." The flash illuminated their shocked faces. Ryan scrambled to cover himself while Samantha's expression finally shifted from contempt to alarm. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded. "Evidence," I replied simply. Ryan found his voice. "Mark, buddy, this isn't." "Don't," I cut him off, surprised by the ice in my tone. 19 years, Sam. 15 years, Ryan. And you couldn't even close the bedroom door properly. I took another photo, ignoring their protests. The strange calm persisted as I methodically documented the scene. This wasn't impulse or emotion. It was self-preservation, a detached part of my brain taking control when the rest wanted to collapse. "I bought your favorite," I said, nodding toward the lasagna. "Figured you might be hungry after your workout." Samantha's face darkened. This wasn't how her script was supposed to play out. I was meant to yell, to break down, to beg for explanations. My composure was stealing her power. "You're being crazy," she said, reaching for her robe. "We need to talk about this like adults." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied, turning toward the door. "Enjoy dinner. I wouldn't want it to get cold." As I descended the stairs, I heard Ryan's hushed voice followed by Samantha's harsh whisper. "Shut up. Let him go, he'll be back. He always comes back." Outside, the evening air felt different against my skin, sharper, clearer. I got into my car and sat still for several minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't slam my fists against the dashboard. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called my cousin David, the ex-cop. "I need a place to stay," I said when he answered. "And advice on finding a good divorce lawyer." "What happened?" David asked, concern evident in his voice. "I just discovered my marriage has been a lie," I replied, starting the engine. "And I think I might be free for the first time in decades." As I drove away from the house where I'd built my life, I realized the breaking feeling inside wasn't my heart shattering, it was the sound of chains falling away. The Desert Moon Motel wasn't much to look at, a single-story remnant of the 1970s with faded paint and flickering neon, but it offered anonymity and distance from the life I thought I knew. Room 17 smelled of industrial cleaner and stale cigarettes, but I barely noticed as I spread credit card statements across the worn bedspread. "You sure you want to go down this rabbit hole tonight?" David's voice crackled through my phone speaker. "Maybe get some sleep first." "If I sleep, I'll dream about them," I replied, scanning the statements I'd downloaded from our joint account portal. "And I need answers more than rest." After hanging up with David, I'd driven straight to an ATM to withdraw enough cash for a few nights' lodging, then called the bank to freeze our joint accounts. David had been clear. Secure assets first, process emotions later. Now, squinting at months of financial records, Patterns emerged that my trusting eyes had missed for years. Weekly charges at high-end restaurants on evenings when Samantha claimed to be at yoga classes. Hotel bookings in neighboring towns during her supposed girls' weekends. Expensive jewelry purchases that I'd never seen her wear. I opened a new browser tab and logged into our investment account, or tried to. The password had been changed. 3 failed attempts later, I called the customer service line. "I'm sorry, Mr. Dalton, but it appears your wife made changes to the account authorization last month," the representative explained after verifying my identity. "She's now the primary account holder. I can't provide specific information without her permission." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Last month? While I was working 60-hour weeks to finish the Harrison project. "Can you at least tell me the current balance?" I asked, my throat suddenly dry. "I'm afraid I can't, sir. You would need to speak with Mrs. Dalton." After ending the call, I sat motionless, piecing together a new reality. This wasn't just an affair. This was calculated. Premeditated. The betrayal had tentacles reaching far deeper than our bedroom. I remembered my mother's words when I'd introduced her to Samantha 15 years ago. "That woman's playing a role, Mark. I've spent 40 years in theater, I know acting when I see it." I dismissed her concerns as old-fashioned suspicion. Now, as I stared at evidence of Samantha's duplicity, Mom's warning echoed with painful clarity. My phone buzzed with a text from Samantha. "Where are you? We need to talk. You're overreacting." I ignored it and reached for my laptop. Something nagged at me, a half-forgotten conversation from years ago when Samantha claimed to have graduated from Berkeley with honors in business. She'd mentioned a favorite professor, and I'd later tried to find him online to send a thank you for inspiring my wife. I'd never located him and eventually forgot about it. Now I typed Samantha Elaine Wilson Berkeley graduate into the search bar. Nothing relevant appeared. I tried variations, different years, her maiden name, combinations of terms. The search results offered no evidence that a Samantha Wilson had ever graduated from Berkeley's business program during the years she claimed. I sat back, running my hand through my hair. The woman I'd married, the woman who knew every detail of my life, my passwords, my finances, my weaknesses, was essentially a stranger. The motel room's safe yielded one more revelation when I retrieved the emergency cash we'd hidden there during check-in. The small manila envelope contained a photograph I didn't recognize. Samantha and Ryan at what appeared to be a lakeside cabin, champagne glasses raised in a toast. The timestamp placed it during my business trip to Seattle last year, a trip Samantha had chosen not to join because of a deadline at work. "You lying bitch," I whispered, the first surge of raw anger finally breaking through my shock. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Samantha. "Your silence is childish. Come home so we can fix this." Fix this? As if her betrayal were a household appliance in need of minor repair. I typed a reply but deleted it. Instead, I called David back. "I need the name of that private investigator you mentioned," I said when he answered. "The one who helped during your custody case." "Cal Jensen," David replied without hesitation. "Best in Colorado. But he's not cheap, Mark." "Money's suddenly a very immediate concern," I admitted, explaining the investment account situation. "But I need to know what else she's hiding." "Check the home safe," David advised. "And any physical records, birth certificates, marriage license, property deeds. If she's been planning this, she might have tampered with documents." I thought of our bedroom safe, hidden behind the antique mirror Samantha had insisted we hang. The combination was our wedding date, a date I was beginning to suspect held no sentimental value for her whatsoever. "There's something else," I said finally. "I don't think she went to Berkeley. I can't find any record of her graduation." David was silent for a moment. "Mark, I hate to ask this, but how much do you actually know about the woman you married?" As moonlight filtered through the thin motel curtains, I realized the devastating answer. Nothing I could trust. Cal Jensen didn't look like a private investigator from a noir film. With his pressed khakis, blue button-down and rimless glasses, he resembled an accountant more than a detective. But his eyes, sharp, observant, missing nothing, told a different story. 20 years in this business, Mr. Dalton, and I've never seen someone hide their tracks this carefully," Cal said, sliding a folder across the table in the corner of a quiet coffee shop 3 days after I'd hired him. "Your wife is professional." I opened the folder and stared at the mugshot of a woman with darker hair but unmistakably Samantha's face. The name beneath the photo read, Sarah Donahue. "Who is Sarah Donahue?" I asked, though some part of me already knew the answer. "That's your wife, circa 2009, Cal replied, sipping his black coffee. Arrested in Phoenix for fraud and identity theft. Charges were eventually dropped when the primary witness disappeared. He paused. Convenient timing. My stomach tightened. And Berkeley? Never attended. Her actual education history shows 2 semesters at Mesa Community College, dropped out. No degree. Cal turned several pages in the folder, revealing documents I couldn't immediately identify. Your wife has been married 3 times, Mr. Dalton. You're number 3. The pattern is remarkably consistent. He pointed to financial records, court documents, and what appeared to be divorce filings. She marries successful men, redirects their assets, then orchestrates messy divorces where she walks away with substantial settlements. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, too small. How did I miss this? She's evolved her methods. With her first husband, Thomas Reeves, she was less sophisticated. The fraud was detectable. He actually caught her forging his signature on property transfer documents. But by husband number 2, Michael Bennett, she'd refined her approach. And with you. Cal's eyes met mine. She had access to your life for nearly 2 decades. Plenty of time to plan. I stared at the documents, trying to process information that refused to settle into any kind of logical framework. There's more, Cal said, his voice softening slightly. She's claiming to be pregnant. My head snapped up. What? Cal slid another document across the table, a medical record with Samantha's name. Confirmed at Denver Women's Clinic 3 weeks ago. Approximately 8 weeks along. The timeline meant nothing to me. Samantha and I hadn't been intimate in months, her excuses ranging from headaches to work stress. The child wasn't mine. Does she know you've hired me? Cal asked. No. I've been avoiding her calls. She doesn't know where I'm staying. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with another text from Samantha. I have news that will change everything. We need to talk in person. I showed the message to Cal, who nodded grimly. The pregnancy reveal. It's a leverage play, Mr. Dalton. Even if the child isn't yours, and given the timeline it's almost certainly not, a pregnancy complicates divorce proceedings, generates sympathy, and can be used to extract larger settlements. She wouldn't actually. I began but stopped myself. 3 days ago, I wouldn't have believed Samantha capable of a decade-long con either. Cal continued methodically outlining what he'd discovered. Offshore accounts in the Caymans where money from our joint accounts had been filtering for years. Evidence that Ryan and Samantha had been in contact for much longer than their affair suggested. And most damning, a series of documents with my forged signature transferring controlling interest in my engineering firm to a shell company they controlled. The signatures wouldn't hold up under forensic examination, Cal explained, but they would create enough confusion to tie up your business in litigation for years. My guess is they were planning to move against you soon, probably using the pregnancy as distraction. I sat in stunned silence, mentally recalculating every moment of my marriage, every anniversary, every vacation, every "I love you" through this new lens. Had any of it been real? What happens now? I asked finally. That depends on what you want, Mr. Dalton. You have enough evidence here for criminal charges, fraud at minimum. Or you could pursue a civil case for financial recovery. Cal gathered the documents, returning them to the folder. Or you could simply walk away with what you still have. Before I could respond, the coffee shop door opened, and a familiar silhouette appeared against the bright sunlight outside. Samantha scanned the room, her hand resting protectively on her stomach in a gesture that now seemed calculated rather than maternal. Our eyes met, and for a brief moment her mask slipped. Surprise, then calculation, flashed across her features before her expression settled into concerned affection. How did she find me? I whispered. Cal glanced toward the door. Is that her? Interesting timing. Samantha approached our table, her walk the perfect blend of confidence and vulnerability. Mark, thank God. We've been so worried. Her eyes flicked to Cal, then the folder. Who's this? I stood slowly, feeling strangely calm for someone whose world had been systematically dismantled. This is Cal Jensen. He's been helping me understand exactly who Sarah Donahue is. The color drained from Samantha's face, but she recovered quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. We need to talk privately. I have news. About your pregnancy? I supplied. Congratulations. Does Ryan know he's going to be a father? Her composure slipped again, just for an instant, before she reached for my hand. Mark, you're confused. Whatever this man has told you. I withdrew my hand from her reach. I'm not confused anymore, Samantha. For the first time in 19 years, I see you clearly. I gathered the folder from the table. And now finally I'm free. Mark Dalton? The unfamiliar voice on my phone carried a slight southern accent. I'd been staring at spreadsheets of financial transactions for hours in my motel room, documenting every instance of Samantha's theft. Who is this? I asked, suddenly wary of unknown callers. Paranoia had become my constant companion in the week since the coffee shop confrontation. My name is Thomas Reeves. I believe we have someone in common. Pause. Sarah Donahue. Though you probably know her as Samantha. I sat up straight, knocking over an empty coffee cup. How did you get this number? Your investigator, Cal Jensen, reached out. Said you might benefit from comparing notes. Thomas's voice held no anger, just a weary recognition. I've been tracking her for 7 years. When your name surfaced in my alerts, I knew she'd found her next target. Next target? I repeated, the words bitter in my mouth. That's one way to put it. Look, I know this is strange, but I'd like to meet. I have documentation you'll find useful. Legal precedents. Financial trails. Another pause. And maybe some perspective you need right now. 2 hours later, I sat across from Thomas Reeves in a private room at the back of a downtown steakhouse. He was older than me by about a decade, with salt and pepper hair and the confident posture of someone accustomed to commanding respect. Hard to imagine him as a victim, yet here we were. She destroyed my architectural firm, Thomas explained, carefully arranging documents on the table between us. Not just financially, she systematically alienated my business partners, undermined client relationships, all while siphoning funds to accounts I couldn't access. He slid a thick legal brief across the table. My lawsuit dragged on for 3 years. By the time I could prove what she'd done, she'd vanished with nearly $4 million of my money. Changed her name, appearance, location. Restarted with Michael Bennett in Chicago. I flipped through the brief, recognizing legal language similar to what Cal had prepared for me. And you've been tracking her since? Thomas nodded. At first for legal reasons, hoping to recover something. Later. He sighed. I couldn't let her do it again. When I found Bennett, it was already too late. His career in finance was ruined, insider trading charges that were later dismissed, but the damage was done. And now me, I said quietly. And now you, Thomas agreed. Except you caught her before the endgame. That's never happened before. I thought about the hidden hard drive Cal had discovered in our home office yesterday, filled with detailed plans for my company takeover, spreadsheets tracking my projects and clients, and most disturbingly, recordings of Samantha and Ryan laughing about my trusting nature. We have everything documented, I said. But she's pregnant. Using that as leverage. Thomas's expression hardened. The pregnancy tactic. She tried that with me too. Convenient miscarriage at 12 weeks, after I'd already agreed to more generous settlement terms. He leaned forward. Mark, you need to understand, everything is a calculated move with her. Nothing is genuine. I pushed away the steak I'd barely touched. I've been wondering if any of it was real. 19 years is a long con. That's what makes her so effective, Thomas said. She commits fully to the role. The longer the relationship, the bigger the potential payoff. He hesitated. Have you contacted Ryan's wife yet? The question startled me. In my focus on Samantha, I'd given little thought to Monica, Ryan's wife of 12 years. No. I wasn't sure what to say. She deserves to know, Thomas said firmly. Not just about the affair, about the financial implications. If Ryan's involved in Samantha's scheme, their joint assets are at risk. I nodded slowly, recalling how close our families had once been, holiday dinners, summer barbecues, the camping trip where Ryan's youngest daughter had called me Uncle Mark for the first time. Another layer of betrayal. I'll call her tomorrow, I promised. Thomas gathered his documents, organizing them meticulously. One more thing. When I confronted Sarah, Samantha, at the end she said something I'll never forget. She said, "You should thank me. I showed you how weak you really are." My stomach twisted at the familiar cruelty. What did you say? A small smile touched Thomas's face. I told her she was wrong. She hadn't shown me weakness, she'd revealed my strength. The strength to rebuild. As we left the restaurant, Thomas handed me a flash drive. Everything I've collected. Bank accounts. Identity changes. Properties under shell companies. Her patterns. Use it however you need to. Under the harsh parking lot lights, he looked suddenly older, the years of pursuit etched in the lines around his eyes. She's gotten more sophisticated with each target, Mark. You're facing the most evolved version of her scheme. Why keep tracking her all these years? I asked. Why not move on? Thomas considered the question. I started for justice. Continued for prevention. But now, he shrugged. Maybe I needed to meet someone who escaped the trap. Gives me hope. Later that night, I sat in my motel room and called a number I'd once known by heart. Hello. Monica's voice sounded tired, wary. Monica, it's Mark. We need to talk. It's about Ryan and Samantha. I took a deep breath. And it's worse than you think. Her silence lasted long enough that I thought she might hang up. Finally she spoke. I know something's wrong. He's been moving money, making excuses. I found documents I don't understand. I have answers, I said. And a plan. You're telling me your wife was a corporate spy? Monica's voice wavered between disbelief and mounting anger as we sat in her kitchen. Documents spread across the granite island between us. Not just a spy, I corrected, pointing to the employment records Cal had uncovered. She worked for TechFusion Industries before we met. They're our biggest competitor. Monica pushed her auburn hair behind her ears, a gesture I'd seen countless times at dinner parties and company picnics. Her hands trembled slightly. And Ryan? How deep is he in this? Her question was barely above a whisper. I slid the folder containing Ryan's secret email communications toward her. He's been selling my designs for at least 3 years. The hydroseal valve system, the pressure regulators for the Antarctic project, and... I hesitated, then revealed the worst betrayal. My new carbon-neutral engine design. The patent I've been working on for 6 years. Monica's face paled. The one you said could revolutionize your industry? I nodded grimly. Worth millions, potentially billions if it performs as expected. And Ryan has been feeding the specifications to TechFusion through a shell company he created. 3 days had passed since my meeting with Thomas. In that time, Cal had uncovered connections I couldn't have imagined. The web of deceit extended far beyond a simple affair or financial fraud. It was industrial espionage on a massive scale. I should have seen it, I said, more to myself than to Monica. Ryan volunteered to review the patent applications. He had access to everything. We both missed what was right in front of us, Monica replied, examining bank statements showing large deposits to an account under Ryan's mother's maiden name. I thought the late nights meant he was working hard. Instead he was... She couldn't finish the sentence. We need to move quickly, I said. I've spoken with James Chen. Monica looked up sharply. Your former security officer? The one Ryan insisted was unnecessary and pushed out. The very same. James is a cybersecurity expert. He's been tracking digital evidence, timestamping everything. We need irrefutable proof before we can approach the board. Won't they believe you? You founded the company. I laughed without humor. The board sees profits. TechFusion has been making aggressive moves to acquire us for years. If they present a compelling enough offer while I'm distracted by personal issues? Understanding dawned in Monica's eyes. They'd sell you out. Some would, I agreed. Not all but enough. I need absolute evidence. Monica stood suddenly. Then let's get it. Tonight. What? Ryan's at a conference in Phoenix until tomorrow. I know his office passwords. We share a password manager. Her expression hardened with resolve. I want to see what he's hiding. 3 hours later, we stood in Ryan's darkened office at Mitchell Dalton Engineering. Using Monica's access card and knowledge of the security system, we'd entered without triggering alarms. Now, with James connected remotely to guide us, we searched for physical evidence to complement the digital trail. Check the false bottom in the right desk drawer, James instructed through my phone speaker. Ryan installed it himself last year. Told IT he needed specialty storage for sensitive client information. Monica found the release mechanism, revealing a hidden compartment containing a portable hard drive and a stack of technical drawings. My drawings annotated in Ryan's handwriting with notes on how to circumvent my proprietary designs. Son of a bitch, I muttered, photographing each document. These are the original sketches that disappeared from my home office. I thought I'd misplaced them. James's voice crackled through the phone. I've accessed his cloud storage using the credentials Monica provided. Mark, there are recordings, meetings between Ryan, Samantha, and someone named Victor Crane. Crane is TechFusion CO, I said, my blood running cold. They recorded their conspiracy? Apparently they needed to keep everyone honest in their dishonesty, James replied dryly. I'm downloading everything now. And, wait, there's an email thread about a presentation Ryan's planning for next month's industry summit. He's going to unveil his new engine design. Your design, Mark. I leaned against the desk, momentarily dizzy with the magnitude of the theft. Years of my life, my greatest professional achievement, stolen by the two people I'd trusted most. This goes beyond divorce and corporate espionage, I said finally. This is criminal. Federal. Monica looked up from the documents she was photographing. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to contact the FBI. Industrial espionage crosses state lines, it's their jurisdiction. I took a deep breath. And I'm thinking we need to let Ryan make his presentation, with a few modifications. Modifications? Monica asked. A trap, I explained. We feed him slightly altered specifications, changes subtle enough that he won't notice but significant enough to prove the designs were stolen when he presents them. James's voice chimed in from the speaker. I like how you think, boss. And I've found something else. Financials showing Tech Fusion has been paying for luxury accommodations for Samantha and Ryan for over 3 years. Weekend getaways documented as consulting meetings. As we carefully replaced everything and prepared to leave, Monica touched my arm. Mark, there's something else you should know. Ryan sold our house last week. I found the paperwork today. He forged my signature on the transfer documents. The familiar pattern hit me like a physical blow. He's planning to run. Just like Samantha did to her previous husbands. Not this time, Monica said firmly. This time they don't get away with it. Outside in the cool night air, I called Thomas Reeves. We found everything we need, I told him. It's time to assemble the team. We're going to need your experience for what comes next. Operation Scorpion? Thomas asked, using the code name we'd devised. Yes, I confirmed. Operation Scorpion begins now. Team Scorpion, check in. James's voice came through the encrypted communication channel he'd established for us. We'd gathered in a rented office space downtown, converted into our impromptu command center. Monica here, came the first response. Thomas, standing by, followed next. Dalton ready, I confirmed, adjusting my earpiece. Agent Alicia Reed of the FBI's Intellectual Property Rights Center nodded approvingly at our professionalism. When I'd approached the bureau with our evidence 3 days earlier, she'd been immediately assigned to the case. Industrial espionage involving clean energy technology was a high priority. Remember, Agent Reed cautioned, we need unambiguous evidence of criminal intent. The recordings you've already provided are compelling, but we need to establish a clear pattern of illegal behavior that will stand up in court. I studied the detailed timeline displayed on the wall-mounted screens. 2 weeks had passed since our nighttime visit to Ryan's office, and in that time, we'd assembled an airtight case documenting years of corporate theft. But the final piece, catching them in the act, required precision timing. Mark, you're up, James reminded me. Make the call. I pulled out my phone and dialed Samantha's number, putting it on speaker for everyone to hear. She answered on the 3rd ring. Finally decided to be reasonable? Her voice was cool, controlled. We need to talk, I said, following our scripted approach. Face to face. About the future of the company. Pause. I'm listening. I've been contacted by the Department of Defense, I continued, feeding her the bait we'd carefully crafted. They're interested in the carbon-neutral engine technology. Potential contract worth over $100 million. The silence on the line felt electric. I could almost hear her mental calculations. That's significant, she finally responded, trying to sound casual. When did this happen? Yesterday. The paperwork is at the house in my home safe. I need to review it before the meeting next week. What meeting? With the Pentagon procurement team. They're flying in Tuesday. I let frustration edge into my voice. Look, I know things are complicated between us, but this is bigger than our personal issues. This contract could transform the company. Another calculated pause. I'll be home this evening. We can discuss it then. After she hung up, Agent Reed nodded. She took the bait. Now we wait. We didn't wait long. Within 20 minutes, James reported activity on our digital tripwires. She's trying to access your home network, he announced, watching data flow across his laptop screen. And, she's calling Ryan. Tracking software is active on both their phones. Monica and I exchanged glances as Ryan and Samantha's conversation played through our speakers, captured by the surveillance software James had legally installed with FBI approval. He says it's a $100 million contract, Samantha was saying, her voice urgent. Defense Department wants the engine design. Are you sure it's legitimate? Ryan asked. Doesn't matter. What matters is getting those files before the meeting. Everything's in his home safe. The combination? Our wedding date. That sentimental fool never changed it. I felt Monica's hand on my shoulder, a silent gesture of support as Samantha's casual cruelty washed over me. I can't get away until tomorrow, Ryan was saying. I'm in meetings all day with the TechFusion team. Let me guess, with Victor? Samantha's voice dripped with disdain. Tell him we need to accelerate the timeline. If the DoD is getting involved, we can't wait for the industry summit to acquire Mark's technology. We need to move now. Agent Reed made a note. That's conspiracy and premeditation. Good. By evening, our surveillance system alerted us that Samantha had entered my home. James split the monitor to show feeds from the hidden cameras we'd installed with the FBI's authorization. She's going straight for the safe, Thomas observed. We watched as Samantha entered the master bedroom, moved aside the antique mirror, and quickly worked the combination. The safe swung open to reveal exactly what we'd planted: folders labeled classified and DoD contract proposal, along with a prototype component of my engine design, modified with microscopic flaws that would definitively prove theft when Ryan inevitably presented it as his own work. She's photographing everything, James noted unnecessarily as we watched Samantha methodically document each page with her phone. And copying the files to a thumb drive, Monica added. Agent Reed nodded, satisfied. We've got her on breaking and entering, theft of trade secrets, and conspiracy. But let's see if she leads us to more accomplices before we move in. Our patience was rewarded when Samantha left my house and drove directly to a luxury hotel downtown rather than returning to her apartment. Hotel surveillance, legally accessed through Agent Reed's warrant, showed her meeting with not only Ryan but also Victor Crane, CEO of TechFusion Industries. The holy trinity of industrial espionage, Thomas murmured as we watched them examining the stolen documents in Crane's suite. This is better than we hoped, Agent Reed said, already coordinating with her team. We've got the competitor directly involved now. As night fell, we continued monitoring their communications, listening as they planned to fast-track patent filings based on my stolen technology, discussed methods to cover their financial tracks, and laughed about how they'd maneuvered me out of my own company. He's so focused on his precious engines he never noticed the real machinery at work, Ryan said, drawing laughs from the others. I should have felt anger, but instead, a strange calm had settled over me. Tomorrow, at the industry briefing Ryan had scheduled to preview innovative technology developments, Operation Scorpion would reach its culmination. Everyone clear on tomorrow's positions? I asked as our team prepared to adjourn for the night. Monica nodded grimly. Crystal clear. It's time they learned what happens when you cross a Dalton. And a Reeves, Thomas added with a tight smile. And the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Agent Reed concluded, gathering her files. Get some rest, everyone. Tomorrow will be a day they never forget. The Denver Tech Innovation Center buzzed with anticipation. Industry leaders, journalists, and engineers filled the auditorium, drawn by rumors of a game-changing announcement from Ryan Mitchell, my former partner and friend. Little did they know they were about to witness a different kind of game entirely. Comms check. James's voice came through my nearly invisible earpiece as I slipped into a seat near the back row, baseball cap pulled low over my face. Everyone in position? Thomas here, east entrance covered. Monica in place, front row. Agent Reed and team standing by, came the FBI agent's crisp response. From my vantage point, I could see Ryan on stage, reviewing notes with the smug confidence of a man who believed victory was already his. Samantha sat in the reserved section, one hand resting on her slightly swollen belly, the pregnancy she'd been using as both shield and weapon. 2 minutes to showtime, James announced. Mark, you ready? I touched my ear in acknowledgement, scanning the room one final time. Victor Crane from TechFusion had just arrived, surrounded by his executive team, all smiles and handshakes as they took their seats in the VIP section. The arrogance was palpable. Right on schedule, the lights dimmed. A hush fell over the audience as Ryan approached the podium, his smile bright enough to be seen from space. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today for what I promise will be remembered as a turning point in clean energy technology, Ryan began, his voice carrying confidently through the state-of-the-art sound system. I watched, oddly detached, as he launched into his presentation. My presentation, my research, MY Life's work, repackaged with his name and TechFusion branding. The slides showed the carbon-neutral engine design I'd refined over 6 painstaking years, each technical breakthrough presented as Ryan's own stroke of genius. For too long, we've accepted the false premise that power and sustainability must be at odds, Ryan continued, echoing words I'd written in my original patent application. Today, I'm proud to announce that Mitchell Engineering has shattered that limitation. I noticed he'd already dropped my name from our joint company. Subtle. As you can see from these performance metrics, Ryan gestured to the screen behind him, our proprietary design reduces carbon emissions by 89% while actually increasing power output. A murmur rippled through the crowd, exactly the reaction I'd received when I'd first shared the concept with Ryan 3 years earlier. The same reaction he dismissed as optimistic thinking. And now, Ryan's voice took on a theatrical quality, I'd like to invite you all to witness the future of energy technology. He dramatically unveiled a physical prototype. My prototype with the subtle modifications our team had made to serve as irrefutable proof of theft. Now, I whispered into my mic. Monica stood from her front row seat, a stack of documents in hand. "Excuse me, Mr. Mitchell," she called out clearly, her voice cutting through the applause. "I have some questions about this technology." Ryan's smile faltered slightly. "We'll have a Q&A session after the presentation, ma'am." "I think these questions can't wait," Monica insisted, stepping forward. "Particularly the question of how you're presenting stolen intellectual property as your own." The audience stirred. Ryan's face hardened as he recognized his wife. "Security," he called out. But before security could respond, I stood and removed my cap. "I think the audience deserves to know the truth, Ryan." A collective gasp swept through the room as I walked toward the stage. Ryan's eyes widened in panic. "Mark, this is hardly the place," he started, but I was already ascending the stairs to the stage. "Actually, this is exactly the place," I replied, taking control of the secondary microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mark Dalton, founder of Mitchell Dalton Engineering. The technology you're seeing today was developed by me and my team over the past 6 years." As if on cue, the presentation screen behind Ryan flickered and changed. James's handiwork, showing side-by-side comparisons of my original designs and Ryan's stolen versions. "If you look closely," I continued, "you'll notice these designs are identical, except for 3 deliberate flaws we introduced into the documents my wife Samantha stole from my home safe 2 days ago." The crowd erupted in confused murmurs. Journalists were already taking furious notes. "This is absurd," Ryan sputtered into his microphone. "Mark is going through a difficult divorce." That's when I did my own reveal. "Actually, what's absurd is the systematic corporate espionage perpetrated by you, my wife, and Victor Crane of TechFusion Industries." At the mention of his name, Crane stood abruptly, motioning to his team. "We're leaving. This is slander." "I wouldn't do that, Mr. Crane," came Agent Reed's authoritative voice as she stepped forward, badge displayed. "FBI. We have some questions about your involvement in industrial espionage and theft of intellectual property." As if perfectly choreographed, Thomas appeared at the rear exits, where several TechFusion executives were attempting to slip away. Behind him stood additional FBI agents. Samantha, meanwhile, had remained frozen in her seat, her face a mask of cold calculation. As agents approached her row, she suddenly clutched her stomach and cried out in apparent pain. "My baby. Something's wrong with my baby." Several people moved to help her, but Monica stepped forward, blocking their path. "Interesting performance," she said loudly enough for nearby journalists to hear. "Almost as convincing as when you faked pregnancies with your previous husbands." Samantha's face contorted with rage, the maternal mask slipping completely. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she hissed. Agent Reed approached with handcuffs. "Actually, Mrs. Dalton, or should I say Ms. Donahue, we know exactly who we're dealing with." As Ryan was led off stage in handcuffs, protesting his innocence, I noticed a journalist from the Denver Business Journal live streaming the entire scene. Behind him, other phones were raised, capturing the moment when justice finally caught up to the architects of betrayal. The day of reckoning had arrived and it was being broadcast in real time. "Mr. Dalton, can you clarify for the court exactly when you became aware that your wife was attempting to transfer company assets without authorization?" I shifted slightly in the witness stand, my tailored suit suddenly feeling restrictive despite the careful measurements. This was my 4th day of testimony in what the media had dubbed the TechFusion trial, and every word was being scrutinized not just by the court, but by an audience that now extended nationwide. "Objection, calls for speculation," interjected Samantha's attorney Leon Prescott, a shark in human form whose designer suits and slick manner matched his exorbitant hourly rate. Judge Harriet Washington, who had presided over the proceedings with an impatience for theatrics and a sharp eye for deception, sighed audibly. "Overruled. The witness will answer." I met Samantha's eyes across the courtroom. 3 months after her dramatic arrest, she maintained a demure appearance. Her hair pulled back in a modest style, her clothes conservative, one hand often resting protectively on her now prominent pregnancy. The perfect picture of a wronged expectant mother. I discovered unauthorized transfer attempts on August 12, I stated clearly. My private investigator uncovered documents with my forged signature on asset transfers dating back approximately 18 months. Prescott rose again. Your Honor, my client was authorized as CFO of the company to make financial decisions. These weren't unauthorized, but standard business operations being recharacterized by a vindictive husband. Your Honor, my attorney Catherine Bell countered immediately, we've already entered into evidence the forensic handwriting analysis confirming these were forgeries, not authorized signatures. Judge Washington nodded. Proceed, Ms. Bell. The questioning continued, another grueling 3 hours of picking apart the complex web of financial fraud, identity theft, and industrial espionage that had been building for years under my nose. When court finally adjourned for the day, I found Thomas waiting in the corridor. How are you holding up? He asked as we walked toward the exit, ignoring the reporter's shouting questions. Honestly? I'm exhausted, I admitted. Every day it's the same performance. Samantha plays the confused, pregnant wife who thought she was helping the business. Ryan claims he was mentored into developing similar technology independently, and Crane acts shocked that his underlings would engage in corporate espionage without his knowledge. Thomas nodded grimly. Same playbook she used with me. The pregnancy sympathy card is especially effective. Outside we met with Catherine and her team for our daily debrief. The case had split into multiple proceedings. The federal criminal case against Ryan, Samantha, and TechFusion executives for intellectual property theft. My divorce proceedings against Samantha, Monica's separate divorce filing against Ryan, and civil lawsuits for damages filed by our company against TechFusion. We need to discuss the settlement offer, Catherine said once we were secure in her office. TechFusion has proposed $20 million in damages plus public acknowledgement of your intellectual property rights. Not enough, I said immediately. The technology is worth billions if properly developed. They're trying to buy their way out of criminal charges. Speaking of criminal charges, Catherine continued, the prosecutor called. Ryan's attorney has approached them about a plea deal. He's offering to testify against Samantha and Crane in exchange for a reduced sentence. The news wasn't entirely surprising. Ryan had been the weakest link from the beginning, more follower than mastermind. What's Monica's position? I asked. She's focused on recovering the assets Ryan hid, Catherine explained. The house sale has been invalidated due to the forged signatures, but there are still offshore accounts they haven't located. The conversation shifted to tomorrow's strategy as Catherine's team prepared me for cross-examination. By the time we finished, night had fallen over Denver, and I was mentally drained from reliving every painful detail of betrayal. As I drove home, to a new condo I'd purchased after refusing to return to the house I'd shared with Samantha, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number from the county jail. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mark. Samantha's voice was softer than I'd heard it in years. We need to talk. My attorney. Not through the attorneys, she interrupted. Just us. About the baby. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. Despite evidence suggesting her previous pregnancy claims had been manipulated or fabricated, this one appeared genuine based on medical records subpoenaed during discovery. There's nothing to discuss, I said finally. DNA testing will determine paternity after birth. It's your child, Mark? Her voice took on a desperate edge I'd never heard before. I was already pregnant when things happened with Ryan. You remember that weekend in May after the Richardson contract? Stop. I pulled over, unable to drive while processing her words. Every word from your mouth has been a lie for 19 years. Why would I believe you now? Because I'm facing 20 years in federal prison, she whispered. Because I need you to ask for leniency. For our child's sake. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost comical. Goodbye, Samantha. After hanging up, I sat in my parked car, watching the city lights blur through unexpected tears. Not tears of loss or betrayal, I'd exhausted those in private moments weeks ago, but tears of release. Finally recognizing the full scope of who Samantha was had freed me from lingering doubts about whether I could have saved our marriage or prevented the betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from James, meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. New evidence about previous Donahue victims. This was the unexpected blessing that had emerged from the wreckage of my life. A team of allies united by a common purpose. Monica, navigating her own painful divorce while providing crucial testimony. Thomas, finally seeing justice for his own losses. James, whose technical expertise had been instrumental in building our case. As I drove home through the Denver night, I realized that although the legal battles might continue for months or even years, I had already won the most important victory, reclaiming my life from those who had tried to steal it. 6 months after the courthouse steps erupted in camera flashes capturing Samantha's 5-year sentence, I stood in the newly renovated headquarters of Dalton Engineering. The company name change had been the first official act after regaining full control, a symbolic severance from the past as much as a practical business decision. "The ethics statement looks good on that wall," commented Monica, who had joined my restructured board of directors. Her expertise in financial compliance had proven invaluable during the rebuilding process. I nodded, studying the framed charter that now dominated our lobby: innovation through integrity. Simple words that had become our guiding principle. "Hard to believe it's only been 6 months, I said, adjusting the frame slightly. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." In many ways it was. The final verdicts had come swiftly once Ryan accepted the plea deal, providing prosecutors with recorded conversations that sank any defense Samantha or Victor Crane might have mustered. Samantha received 5 years for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Crane got 8 years for his role orchestrating the industrial espionage. Ryan, true to form, received a suspended sentence and probation in exchange for his testimony, though his professional reputation was irreparably destroyed. The paternity test had come back 2 months ago. Despite Samantha's insistence, the baby, a boy, wasn't mine. Some final manipulation that had failed like all the others. I felt an odd mixture of relief and sadness when I received the news, though the child would be placed with Samantha's sister during her incarceration. "The compensation fund is ready to launch," Monica continued as we walked through the building. "Thomas has identified 8 additional victims of Samantha's schemes over the years. Using part of the $35 million settlement from TechFusion, I'd established a foundation to support victims of fraud and identity theft. Thomas served as its director, channeling his years of tracking Samantha into helping others rebuild their lives after similar betrayals." "Good," I replied. "Make sure they know it comes without publicity requirements. Some may want privacy." Monica nodded, understanding the value of quiet recovery. Her own divorce had finalized last month, and like me, she'd chosen to rebuild rather than retreat. We parted ways at the elevator, and I continued alone to my office, trying to focus on the day's meetings. Despite the outward signs of recovery, the successful business, the legal victories, the new home I'd purchased, inwardly I still struggled. Trust, once shattered, proved harder to rebuild than any company. That evening, as rain tapped against my office windows, I found myself staring at old photographs I'd impulsively retrieved from storage. Images of Samantha and me in happier times, or what I'd thought were happier times. Had she been playing a role even then, smiling for the camera while calculating her next move? A knock at my door interrupted these dark thoughts. "Your 7 o'clock is here," my assistant announced. "Dr. Lauren from Phoenix Trauma Recovery." I'd been putting off this meeting for weeks, despite Thomas's insistence that professional help wasn't a weakness but a necessity. "Betrayal trauma is real," he'd explained. I waited too long to address mine. "Don't make the same mistake." Dr. Lauren proved nothing like the stern psychiatrist I'd imagined. In her 50s with warm eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, she established the parameters of our potential work together with refreshing directness. "I don't offer platitudes or quick fixes, Mr. Dalton," she said after introductions. "Recovering from betrayal of this magnitude is complex. You've lost not just a marriage but your basic trust in your own judgment. That's a profound injury." Her words struck with uncomfortable precision. "I'm functioning fine," I protested weakly. "The company's doing well, the legal issues are mostly resolved. And you're looking at old photos late at night, questioning every memory and struggling to form new connections," she finished for me. "Does that sound like someone who's healed?" I stared out at the rain, suddenly feeling the weight of exhaustion that had become my constant companion. "How did you know about the photos?" "Because trauma follows patterns, Mr. Dalton. Your experience, while extreme in its details, follows recognizable psychological pathways." She leaned forward slightly. "The question is whether you want to continue down this path alone, or work with someone who can help navigate it." Something in her straightforward approach bypassed my usual defenses. 4 months, I'd maintained the facade of the man who had triumphantly exposed the conspiracy, reclaimed his company, and moved forward. Few saw the sleepless nights, the constant second-guessing, the isolation I'd built around myself. "I've lost faith in my own perceptions," I admitted finally. "Everything I believed was a lie." "Not everything," Dr. Lauren corrected gently. "The betrayal was real, but so was your response to it. Your resilience, your ethical choices under pressure. Those reveal your true character, Mr. Dalton." We scheduled weekly sessions, and as I saw her out, a notification pinged on my phone. The renovation company working on the historic Chambers building downtown had sent preliminary sketches for my approval. The project had been an impulse decision, a century-old building in need of complete restoration. Something about its solid bones and neglected potential had spoken to me when I'd first toured it 3 weeks ago. "The project architect will call tomorrow to discuss these," the message read. "Elena Vasquez is leading the design team." As I scrolled through the thoughtful, innovative sketches that honored the building's history while reimagining its future, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, a flicker of genuine interest in something beyond survival. Perhaps this restoration project was a fitting metaphor for my own life. Damaged but not destroyed, in need of careful rebuilding rather than demolition. Worth saving despite the cracks in the foundation. For the first time in 6 months, I found myself looking forward to tomorrow. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how failure can become your greatest teacher. Applause rippled through the convention center as I concluded my keynote address at the National Engineering Innovation Summit. 2 years had passed since the day my life had imploded in that motel room, staring at credit card statements that revealed a stranger wearing my wife's face. As the audience rose for a standing ovation, I caught Elena's eye in the front row, her proud smile warming me more than the approval of 500 industry peers ever could. After leaving the stage, I was immediately surrounded by young engineers seeking advice, business leaders proposing collaborations, and journalists requesting interviews. The irony wasn't lost on me. My very public fall and resurrection had transformed me from a respected but relatively unknown engineer into something of an inspirational figure. "Mr. Dalton, do you have a moment?" I turned to find a reporter from Technology Today, tablet in hand. "Just a quick one," I agreed. "I have a commitment shortly." "Your story has obviously resonated with people far beyond the engineering community," she began. "What would you say was the turning point between victim and victor in your journey?" I considered the question carefully. I think we often expect transformation to happen in dramatic moments, the courtroom victory, the business breakthrough. But real change happens in quiet decisions. For me, it was choosing to seek help rather than trying to rebuild alone. My weekly sessions with Dr. Lauren had extended into 18 months of hard, often painful work. Learning to trust again, not with blind faith but with informed caution. Recognizing that Samantha's deception reflected her character, not my worth. As the crowd thinned, I checked my watch and made my way toward the exit where Elena waited. Her dark hair was pulled back in her characteristic neat bun, architectural precision reflected in everything from her posture to her thoughtfully designed clothes. "Great speech," she said, falling into step beside me. "Though you left out the part where you nearly set fire to the Chambers building trying to make me dinner on our 3rd date." I laughed, taking her hand as we walked. "Some details are better left private. Besides, that led to our first real conversation about rebuilding after disaster." We had met precisely as the renovation drawings had promised. A phone call to discuss the Chambers building restoration that had somehow extended into a 2-hour conversation about preservation versus innovation, honoring history while creating something new. Themes that resonated deeply with both of us for different reasons. Elena had her own story of rebuilding, a career painstakingly reconstructed after losing everything in a hurricane that destroyed her Houston office and portfolio. Perhaps that shared experience of starting over was what had allowed me to gradually lower my carefully constructed walls. Outside the convention center, a familiar figure approached. Thomas, older now but carrying himself with the lightness of a man unburdened. "Powerful speech," he said, clasping my hand. "The foundation has already received 16 calls from companies wanting to support our work." The Second Chance Foundation had grown beyond our initial vision, now offering both financial and psychological support to victims of fraud and identity theft. Thomas had transformed his years of pursuing justice into creating paths to recovery for others. "How many are attending the symposium tomorrow?" I asked as we walked toward the restaurant where we'd planned to meet Monica and her new husband for dinner. "Over 200 registered," Thomas replied, "including 3 former victims who are now mentors in the program." As we settled into dinner, surrounded by people who had walked with me through darkness into light, I felt a sudden buzz in my pocket, an alert from the security monitoring service I still maintained. Someone had accessed the file on Samantha. "Everything okay?" Elena asked, noticing my distraction. Yes, I said, putting my phone away. Just a notification about Samantha. She's being released next month. The table fell momentarily silent. Monica reached across to squeeze my hand. Are you concerned? I considered the question honestly, searching for the knot of anxiety that would have consumed me a year ago. It was there but smaller, manageable. No, I said finally. Her power was in secrecy. In the dark. We've brought everything into the light. Later that evening, Elena and I walked along the river path near the newly completed Chambers Tower, the restored building now housing not only offices but an innovation center for young engineers I'd established last year. This is where we first met, I said, stopping at the corner where we'd literally bumped into each other while both examining the building's facade. Right here, I was staring up at damaged cornices and didn't see you doing the same thing. Elena smiled at the memory. You were so focused on what was broken, you couldn't see what was standing right in front of you. A perfect metaphor for that time in my life, I agreed, reaching into my pocket for the small box I'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. As I lowered to one knee, Elena's eyes widened with recognition. Elena Vasquez, you showed me that broken doesn't mean beyond repair. That something damaged can be rebuilt stronger than before. My voice was steadier than I'd expected. Will you marry me? Her yes was immediate and certain, her embrace solid and real in a way that grounded me firmly in this new life I'd created from the ashes of betrayal. The manuscript of my book, Phoenix from the Ashes, How to Transform Betrayal into Your Greatest Opportunity, was sitting on my editor's desk, scheduled for publication next spring. But the true story wasn't in those pages. It was here, in this moment, in the hard-won capacity to love and trust again. As we walked home beneath Denver's star-filled sky, I realized that Samantha, for all her destructive intent, had inadvertently given me a precious gift. In trying to destroy me, she had instead forced me to discover strengths I never knew I possessed, and a life far richer and more authentic than the one she'd taken. The phoenix had risen, stronger than before.